come state? Sto bene, sto imparando italiano e adesso farò un video sulla tema di imparare italiano e in particolare il mio viaggio di impararlo. Se vediate, sto parlando italiano e non ho un testo. In questo video vedremo il mio viaggio di italiano, cosa ho fatto per impararlo, alcuni consigli che ho, non so. Okay, I'm gonna switch to English. Basically, this is a video about my 6-month journey of learning Italian and how it's been going, and look at my first 6 months of learning a new language. Hopefully this will be of use to you and give you a realistic look at what it's like to start learning a new language if that's something you're interested in. So I've been excited to make this video for a while. 6 months was a solid amount of time to really be able to reflect. I hit a big milestone recently in which I finished reading my first book in Italian. It's called Novecento. There's a picture of it, and it's only like a 70-page book. On the cover it says that it's like a book for 11-year-olds, so it's cool to know that I have almost the reading comprehension of an 11-year-old. La prima al fine neve. Non ho parlato in italiano per un po' tempo. Riguardano i miei bulbi oculari. Allora sto emozionato per il mio trasloco a Portland, perché Portland è un bel posto secondo me, e durante l'estate specifico. So the first question is, how good is my Italian? If you're an Italian speaker, go ahead and leave a comment below of how good you think my Italian is. But otherwise, as a self-assessment, I would say that I'm an intermediate learner at this point. And that's according to the scale established by the European Union called the CEFR, that goes from A, beginner, to C, advanced, and B is intermediate. And I would say that I am a B1 learner. I would say that I'm able to understand most Italian stuff most of the time. Something like a YouTube video, I generally can watch it and understand 90% of what's going on. I can navigate the website in Italian. In terms of speaking, I would say that I'm able to have a conversation. You could say conversational, even though I hate that word. When I am talking though, I'm still making a lot of pauses. Going from discomfort expressing yourself to comfortably expressing yourself is, I think, a huge difference between the level that I'm at, B1, and the next level, B2. And finally, I asked ChatGPT and it said that I was B1. So there you go, I'm B1. So the next thing we're gonna do is talk about what specifically I've done the last 6 months. Since I was learning to learn, I changed what I did a lot. So the first 2 months, I did what most people do. I installed Duolingo. Duolingo was very addictive for me. I probably used it for an average of an hour a day for about a month. The leaderboards were very motivating for me. I always wanted to win. Often I would have like twice as much XP as the next person. Over time, I started to find myself less and less motivated to do Duolingo. And I think there's quite a few factors of it. First of all, it's just really boring. Like, it's very repetitive. Basically, the way that exercises are formed is that they write an Italian sentence and they write an English sentence, and then there's some kind of like word mapping or something. Basically, that sentence generates like 4 or 5 different kinds of exercises, and they're just randomized. So you'll literally see the same sentence like 10, 20 times. Duolingo is also very strict. You can basically like get something generally correct, but it'll still flag you as wrong because you didn't use the exact structure that they wanted you to. If your grammar is not perfect, it's gonna say you're wrong and slow you down. As I was using Duolingo more and more, it got harder and harder for me to get the same amount of XP every day. It seems silly, but basically, like, since I was motivated by the XP system, when the XP system started getting harder and harder to use, that led to me being demotivated. I started to feel like I was like gonna hit a wall. Started having to struggle with all of these doubts about like, am I really gonna be able to learn this language? Like maybe this isn't for me, maybe I should quit. In the middle of that, I started using this other app called Busuu. Busuu is more handcrafted and the lessons are also a lot less grindy. So the problem with Busuu probably would be that you can just fly through the lessons and not really retain anything because the review system is somewhat rudimentary. It's just like flashcards. Busuu has the same like streak system and competition system, but since I was already like burned out from Duolingo, I didn't dive into Busuu as hard, but I did a decent amount. I'm not gonna just bash Duolingo for the next hour. Like, if you want to see people bashing Duolingo, you can just look up other videos on YouTube. What I will say is this. As a software engineer, and even as someone who's read some articles about how Duolingo is designed, a software product is optimized to fulfill a certain goal. The goal of Duolingo is not to have someone learn Italian or Spanish or any other language. It's for that person to use Duolingo every day and to stick to Duolingo and ultimately to get people to pay for Duolingo. Duolingo was originally modeled after game apps. Duolingo is not designed to help you learn a language. The language learning is a nice side effect of playing this game every single day. It's just like Candy Crush. Yeah, I didn't really do anything other than learn Duolingo. The other thing that I did was I took this class called Language Transfer, which is like an audio class where you pause and respond to the instructor. I also did language transfer for Greek, and I had made a whole video about it, but in God, I thought that class was amazing. Come the new year, I sort of really turned a corner, and this is what I would call the second stage of my language learning journey. There were two major breakthroughs that I made in learning. The first one is that I had my first conversation in Italian with a native Italian speaker. At the end of last year, I went to this international conference. It's called Revive if you're interested. And at that conference, I met Italian people, and I met this one guy, Iman, that I became language exchange partners with. In the month of January, I had like 20 Discord calls with this guy where we would practice Italian. And it was really cool to start actually using Italian to have a conversation with someone. The second thing, breakthrough that I made was that at the middle of the month of January, I listened to a podcast for learners. So it was very simple, very slow. I was like, whoa, I understand what this podcast is talking about. This is insane. It felt like a huge breakthrough. Finally, I think I was gaining motivation because I was getting ready to go to Italy. Like, going to Italy was a whole reason for me to start learning Italian in the first place. Like, otherwise there's not a ton of opportunities to use that language. So I had this Italy trip planned, and then I started learning it 3 months before the trip. And that third month before the trip, as for what I was doing, I basically stopped using Duolingo like almost entirely. I really started to focus more on doing input. So there's this thing called comprehensible input. It's a little bit of a popular thing in the language learning community. It's all about just like watching a lot of videos and listening to a lot of podcasts, reading books, whatever. So I was trying to do that, and I was lucky to find some YouTubers that are really dedicated to making comprehensible input. So I did that. I also did that with a podcast. It's how I found that podcast I could understand. So I was watching a lot of YouTube videos from that. Occasionally I would try to watch a YouTube video that was made by an Italian for another Italian person, as opposed to made by an Italian for a foreign language learner. Usually I couldn't understand it. I also was using this tool called LingQ, which is made by this big comprehensible input guy named Steve Kaufman. It's basically an assisted reader. So there's some comprehensible input stories on LingQ, but you can also just read regular books and whatever, but it's assistive, so it helps you read it even if you're not at a high enough level. And how it does that is it basically just has a built-in dictionary that you can use to look up any word that you don't understand. You mark words as either being known or not being known, and you can sort of see like, oh, I've seen this word before, I should maybe know what it means, or you can mark a word as like, I do know what it means, and then over time, the number of known words that you have is like essentially your progress within the language. So I was using this app LingQ. I used it a lot for like 2 weeks and then I dropped it. I was watching a lot of YouTube videos. I was listening to podcasts, mostly for comprehensible input. And then I was also doing these daily conversations, and I was really starting to get very motivated, very looking forward to Italy. So that moves me into stage 3 of my learning, which is going to Italy. And okay, like, yes, obviously being in the target country helps you learn a lot. One thing that's funny is that I spent a lot of time learning Italian by myself or in my room or something while I was in Italy. The thing is, like, it's not that easy to find people who are willing to talk to you if your Italian level is not that high. Either the conversation just ends when they realize that you're not fluent, the conversation turns into English when they realize that you're not fluent. It was kind of hard to try to find a consistent source of conversations. People don't necessarily just want to have long conversations with strangers, especially in a big city like Rome. But starting to get at the end of the month, I started to get very discouraged. I'm not fluent yet, and I started to get pretty sad about having to leave and not having made that much progress. I came back from Italy and I sort of realized that language learning is all about just putting the time in. And so what I finally started to do is I started recording every single minute that I was learning Italian. And I use this app called Toggl Track. Yeah, I've been recording how much time I've been learning Italian. And generally, I track activities based on how much focus or attention I need. Passive listening hours, active listening or watching hours, conversation or output hours, and then hours using app. I was also using this app called Anki in order to learn all of the tenses in Italian, because I'd got to a point where I was just really frustrated with not knowing the subjunctive or the conditional or the future tense. Or right now, the thing about learning Italian is there's just like so many options of what I could be doing in order to learn it. So I could be like watching YouTube videos, like conversation practice, journaling, I could be vlogging. There's like so many different options of what to do that sometimes I don't know what to choose. That's been everything that I've been doing in order to learn Italian so far. If I could go back, what would I do differently? The first thing is I wish I had known that there's just a lot of different ways to learn language, and people have different language learning styles. So you might be someone who's really into having conversations. So just like try to have as many conversations as possible. You don't need to like try to watch videos or read. To not feel super trapped into doing a certain way, I really don't think it's appropriate to prescribe a particular way of doing it. Like, I don't even think that like taking a class is necessarily wrong, but I was glad to find that like, oh, classes don't really work for me, but you don't have to do that. You can just like do input, you know? The other thing that I would have been like to know is like that to find alternatives from using like Duolingo and Busuu faster, because it really was soul sucking near the end of that to just be like trying to use those apps for like hours. And it's ultimately at the end of the day, it's just not that fun for me. Like, I don't think I'm ever really going to use it again, primarily for learning another language. Finally, I would just say like, I wish I was less stressed, and I wish that I compared myself less to other people. Like, I remember watching YouTube videos about people that were like learning Italian in like a month, like 7 days. Your speed of how fast you learn language depends on how many languages you know, and also which languages you know. Do they know Spanish and French already? Like, okay, yeah, learning Italian is gonna be really easy, you know? It doesn't matter if you've forgotten something. You can just look it up again, or you'll probably just encounter it again. And if you spend enough time, you'll get exposed to everything and you'll figure out everything. Just don't stress about like not knowing something. You'll learn it eventually. Where I would like to be is fluent, which I would say is C1. Some people say B2 is fluent. It doesn't really matter. And my goal would be to get there in 2 years total. So I'm making the 6-month update now. By 6 months, I should be able to get to B2 if I'm going at this pace. And then in a year and a half, I'll hopefully be at C1. Like I said earlier, I think a big problem that I have right now is that it's hard for me to focus on a particular thing or not to do. I'm gonna start trying to figure out monthly challenges where I really focus on a particular thing to do that month. Another thing I wanna do is start doing like sprint days where I learn Italian for like 8 hours or more, dedicating entire days to like, okay, I'm spending this whole day learning Italian and just seeing like how much of a boost that can be. That's been 6 months of learning Italian. I hope I can make another 6 months and make another video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in 6 months.